welcome to the female VC Lab podcast. I have Tanya and Gail here. So, ladies, why don't you each give me your name, your title, and the name of your fund? Tanya, why don't we go first with you?
Sure. I'm Tanya Rolfe, thank you. Tanya Rolfe and managing partner at Her Capital.
Gail.
And I'm Gail, the other managing partner at Her Capital.
Wonderful. So, Gail, we'll start with you. What inspired you to become a venture capitalist or an investor?
I have to say, my daughter. I was a banker, investment banking, did all the deals, and I thought that perhaps it was an anomaly, that I was the only woman, person of color in the room most of the time. And then I had my daughter and I realized, actually, it's not that unusual. This is what girls who grow up to be women in the future experience every day in business. And what does that mean for the rest of us when we have businesses changing the way we live and work and play, and not having women in the driver's seat innovating and designing the world for women? I think venture capital is where it's a turnkey tool, a part of this ecosystem that enables that scale, enables that impact. And I want that impact to be inclusive. And that's how we ended up starting a fund to back female founders.
That's awesome. Tanya, what inspired you to become an investor?
It wasn't exciting as Gail's story. It was a move from Europe to Singapore. So from London to Singapore, and I just had two children very close together. They were very small, and I had a passion for gender equality from my legal days, where there are, much like Gail's finance industry and the legal industry in senior roles, virtually no women either. So I had that within me, and then moved to Singapore, and it felt like a great time. New country, new start, new continent, new everything, do something different. And that's where I bumped into Gail and we joined forces.
Awesome. I love that. Sometimes you're just the only woman in the room, and that's just how it is. And sometimes you're the only female VC in the room as well. So, Tanya, why don't you tell me a little bit about your investment thesis? And I'll ask Gail about the motivation for the thesis.
Sure. So we are obviously female-led fund, and as most of us know in the venture capital space, we tend to invest in those that in businesses and products and services and people that we recognize and know. And so for us, we're investing in female founders and in women-led companies, predominantly across Southeast Asia or in a few other key markets, which I'll get to in a second. But we require there to be one woman in the founding team. And we focused primarily on female consumer and consumer technology. And then we also do a portion of our fund is focused on social impact. And there's a small portion of our fund, it's also technology of the future. So we're looking at, particularly this year, we've noticed a huge amount of deals in the education technology space, HR technology, but still rather agnostic in that portion of the fund. So as I said, around 80% of our fund is likely to be operationed here in Southeast Asia. And then we have a couple of key sort of carve outs where we're looking in North America, Hong Kong and Australia. We see a lot of talent in those three geographies, particularly around female health, which is an area of interest for the fund.
Awesome. So, Gail, what is the motivation behind the thesis?
Sure. I think the geographic one is obvious, so I'll start there. We're here, we're on the ground. I'm from Singapore, and this is an untapped market. We tend to lag the U.S. When I moved back from the States to Singapore, I had 5 different ideas, just looking at things that were mainstream in the U.S. to bring to Asia, and I think that's still the case when it comes to certain innovations. So we see this as a market that is untapped for many companies further afoot. And then there's a rising consumer class and spend and earnings in this part of the world to tap. I think more fundamentally, we want to back the female vision, as I was saying, which is underrepresented and oftentimes underestimated. And so that really has the biggest impact when it comes to serving women's needs, hence the consumer focus, and also, innovating problems that women tend to understand better. For example, caregiving for elderly or for the young, or healthcare in general. Who's handling that for all the families and households in this part of the world tends to be women. And so they're best placed to stitch together or see the connections between public and private and innovate solutions that will truly work and address our, 17 urgent problems that faces humanity as defined by the UN SDGs. That's the thinking behind the two verticals. And I think on the third, the sort of a more general tech-driven one, it's an obvious one. We don't want to miss that. And I think female founders in those spaces tend to have to battle unconscious bias, or they're compared to their louder, more aggressive male counterparts. And we believe we're uniquely suited to diligence them and to support them post-investment.
Excellent, excellent. So, Gail, I'll start with you on this question, then I'll come back to you, Tanya. What are you currently learning or listening to or reading? How are you developing yourself?
Yeah, there's a lot out there, isn't it? Yes. So I try to get a handle of it. I would think of it. I would think of the inputs into my brain in a couple buckets. One, I need to be inspired, and this is not a journey as founders, but also in VC and the startups that we work. This is not for the faint-hearted, and we need to be
Absolutely
connected
not.
to what gets us out of bed. So one place I draw a lot of inspiration from is the SheEO podcast.
Oh, okay.
I'm part of that network,
Cool.
and they showcase ventures, or they talk about the systemic issues around women funding women. That is always uplifting, so that's important. The other is just staying on top of industry trends. That's a little bit more boring, but necessary for work, I think. That can vary. Like, I rely on my feed a lot, and I make sure I follow the right people on social to get that top thinking.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then lastly, I think is personal development, right? We always need to grow as investors. You may have strengths in certain fields, but we need to try and be rounded. So for me, it's I work on something every year around a skill I'd like to develop. Right now, it's about following energy, like a personal practice. Following energy. If someone sends an email, or someone runs an idea by me, how do I follow that energy in a way that builds it, that amplifies it, right? Or before, it would sit in my inbox, or I'd forget about it, or I'll circle back 3 months later. It doesn't quite the same. So yeah, that's a practice for me.
But that's interesting. How do you allocate your energy to certain things versus other things? It's an interesting practice.
You need to stay on top of that in this data explosion.
100%. It can be very difficult because there's multiple channels of communication now. And so which ones do you prioritize over others? And like you say, which one do you give your energy to? And how do you move certain things forward? And it's not 6 months later.
Timing, right?
That's valid.
That's a big piece.
Yeah. Tanya, same for you. What are you currently listening to or learning or reading?
I've been asked this question before after Gail's answered, and I find it really hard after Gail's answered this, because she's so thoughtful and she thinks about her year ahead, and she plans and she executes, and she is spot on usually. And I'm the complete opposite. And I'll be honest, I feel like the last probably 3 months of my life has been one everyday, constant learning curve and learning journey, launching a venture capital fund for the first time.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely a learning journey.
I'm not sure I have any
100%.
space for anything else in my, when I finish, and I lead our fundraising efforts. So I do a lot of calls with like Europe and US in the evenings. And so when I close my laptop at 11 p.m. or whatever, the last thing I want to do is learn about something else. I've been learning since 8 a.m. Like I can't learn, I've nothing left. So actually for me, it's about escapism at the moment. And I'm trying to find a balance because everything I'm doing in the business is a learning journey. For me, it's actually clinging to things that bring me a little bit of balance.
Well, that's a learning.
My mind. Yeah.
That's a learning right there. Hey, I need balance. That's a huge learning. And I think sometimes we don't think about that. Like, how do we get that balance?
Yeah.
We have to do, and we have to take that for ourselves. Because as women, we give a lot of ourselves. And then, like you said, at the end of the day, I'm kind of done. But then when you have time for anything else, like your kids or yourself, or we have to take care of ourselves. We have to give ourselves permission to do that. I think sometimes we don't do that.
Yeah. I think this year as well, with everything being online, is great in a way, but also I do feel like I cram more in. So that the need for balance is even more present, certainly in my life.
You have to learn. It's funny when this happened and everyone think online, I was totally non-impacted because I'd already virtualized myself years ago. So to migrate to becoming virtual was like very simple. An easy transition. Everyone didn't have as easy a transition. So you didn't have the routines and the cores that you would normally have if you had other structures. Okay, I have to go out, so I have to start. You still have those same cores. It's just now it applies to a remote life. And then, okay, I still have to remember to eat. Sometimes, got to get my lunch and everything. But I forgot to eat when I was out anyway. So that might just be a normal thing. But I agree. You have to have these your different structures built in with everything more virtualized.
Yes. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're like you say, you go from 8 to 11. I've done that multiple days. 8 to 11. You're like, wow, the day is over. What did I do? Sometimes I'm like, what did I even get done?
Yeah. Yep. I'm there.
All right, ladies. Tanya, you're first on this one. In 2 years, when me and you and Gail are speaking again, how will you have seen venture capital or investing evolve?
I'm going to answer that in a very narrow way because it's what I really care about, which is female fund managers actually getting funded. And that's my personal challenge at Her Capital, as I mentioned, in charge of leading our fundraising efforts. And I am doing what I can to right now, not just for me, but it's important for us as a fund to get our fund off the ground, but it's really important as well, particularly in this region in Southeast Asia, where there's not a lot of female-led, female-focused funds supporting female founders. So I want to make a success of Her Capital to show other women, other fund managers, emerging managers or otherwise, to launch their own funds and support female founders. And so 2 years on, I want to see that 3% of female founders have access to in venture capital. I want to see that increased, and I want to be part of that.
Awesome. Gail, in 2 years when we're sitting down, how do you see venture capital having evolved?
I'd certainly echo what Tanya said. I think I have a bigger aspiration or wish for VC. I don't know if it will be accomplished in 2 years, but you may have seen articles and commentary around what's broken in VC today.
Multiple. But it's funny. I don't really look at what's broken. I'm like, you have to create your own thing. We know it's broken, so like we can concentrate on that and complain about that all we want. It's not going to solve anything. In the end, I'm an engineer. I'm just like, we got to fix the whole thing. So let's just do something else. Create what it should be.
Yes, I think alternatives will start to question the status quo and cause that reflection or internal shift in mindset, right? So here's my executive coach training coming up. Like, I'm a believer that it's inside out And a fund can run gender initiatives or diversity initiatives, but if it's not inside out, it doesn't carry through. It looks good, but it doesn't translate to the returns, to enhance relationship, whatever it is that they want to achieve. So I'd like to see more partners, like-minded VCs who are founder-friendly, who perhaps are willing to engage in the inquiry of, is there bias in our approach? How are we leaving people out, right? And leaving money on the table? Because we can't do this alone as a fund. Say we raise our fund and we're a success, but our capital alone doesn't shift that across the board. Partners in later stage funds to work with and to pass our founders on to. So that's what I would like to see.
Ecosystem building, that's what I call it. You got to build the whole, you got to make the whole stack. Like wherever you're slotted, you have to then say, okay, I need the next level and the next level. And really you need 2 or 3 or 4 levels up. You don't just need one, you need multiple, because you want the next one and then the next one and then the next one to like carry your founders forward. And those are hard to find sometimes, but
we see that too, right? Starting from addressing female consumers, we need female founders, we need female founders funded, and then these funds also need LPs who can see that impact.
You need the LPs, and then you need, like you said, you need the next level of fund, and the next level of fund, then the next level of fund, even beyond that. So it's a lot of ecosystem building that needs to be done. If you look at Silicon Valley, even though we know it's broken, they did do one thing. They created a massive ecosystem. So if you get plugged in there, you can get funded. They have various resources, I call them resources beyond just money, where it's a very mature way that they've created that. So we have to just create that for ourselves, in essence, like that kind of ecosystem, not necessarily the same bias and all that, but that's non-trivial.
Not at all.
It's not trivial, but it's not impossible. It's just, it's something that everyone has to be mindful. Like we start to being mindful about it. Okay, if we're going to start doing these things, how do we start plugging these other things in? How do we start moving these things along? We have to start really being mindful about it and then start executing on it at some point. That's all we can do.
I do see green shoots. There's definitely awareness. And if you think about how far sustainable investing as a theme has come in the last 2 years, and how much it's talked about now and what's shifting.
All companies have ESGs. Google did a green bond. Amazon has their own fund. We're into the sustainability in our fund as well. We actually have our companies do sustainability plans for a year. So they have to be very green, even if they're a tech company. We've got some techniques they can do to make sure that they're sustainable outside of the female gender balance portion and the other parts we have. But everyone is on the ESG. If you're not doing that, I don't think you'll get funded, and I don't think you'll have customers at some point. That's the way we see it.
And that's remarkable from 2 years ago. Yeah,
that's true.
I draw hope from that.
Awesome. Tanya, how do people get in contact with you?
Super active on LinkedIn. That is the best way to get in contact with me. So Tanya Rolfe on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Gail, how about you?
LinkedIn is great. Gail Wong or gail@hercapital.vc.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Tanya and Gail from Her Capital, for being my guest on the Female VC Lab podcast.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.